Since the official birth of what we now know as the United States of America in the year 1776, this giant landmass here between Canada and Mexico has experienced explosive population growth. But obviously, that population growth is not distributed equally. We'll get back to that here in a moment, but first let me introduce you to America's favorite podcast since the year 1776, when my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Nicholas Emel I launched Tennis Podcast. However, this isn't just any old Tennis Podcast episode. No, this is The Tiny Tennis. The Tiny Tennis features yours truly, Nick Emel, covering top 10 lists in about 10 minutes or less on the first Sunday of every month. And here today on this first Sunday of February 2025, I'm going to talk about the least populated states here in the US of A. Let's start by taking a step back and examine the population as a whole of the United States. Some of these factors really blew me away, so allow me to now blow you away. The United States had an official estimated population of 340,110,988 people as of July 1st, 2024. According to the United States Census Bureau. The U.S. population has almost quadrupled during the 20th century at a growth rate of about 1.3% per year, from about 76 million people in the year 1900 to 281 million people in the year 2000. It is estimated to have reached the 300 million mark by October 2006. So again, in the year 1900, there was 76 million people here. Now, just about 106 years later, that more than tripled to 300 million in 2006. And today, again, 340 million. Foreign-born immigration has caused the U.S. population to continue its rapid increase, with the foreign-born population doubling from almost 20 million in 1990 to 45 million in 2015, representing 1/3 of the total population increase. And as of 2023, more than 83% of Americans live in or around urban areas. That means more than 3/4 of the U.S. population shares just about 3% of the U.S. land area. 3/4 of everyone who lives in the U.S. lives in 3% of our total land. That is crazy. Our leading urban centers are, of course, New York City, Los Angeles, and Truth or Consequences in Chicago. The median age of the total population as of 2021 is 38 years. About 39% of Americans are between the ages of 25 and 54. Let's start talking about the states in particular. The 9 most populous states in America contain slightly more than half of the total country population. The 25 least populous states contain less than 1/6 of the total population. But California is the most populous state. It contains more people than the 21 least populous combined. California is huge. Now, the list for today is again the least populated states. It's as of 2023. This represents the number of people living in each state. The number 1 on the list has the lowest population. I pulled notes from USA Today, Britannica, the CIA website, and Wikipedia. Before we get to the list of the least populated, let's give you some context with the most populated, just so you have a reference point. Number 1, I said it before, it's California. There's 39 million people there. Number 2 is Texas with 31 million people. Florida is next with 23 million people. California, Texas, Florida. Number 1 on the list of least populated barely cracks 500,000, but we'll get to that shortly. Let's start at number 10. The 10th least populated state in America is New Hampshire. 1.4 million people live here. Yes, I'm rounding on each of these. And for each of these states, I'm going to give you some brief fun facts about them. So first, New Hampshire. Following mounting tensions between the British colonies and the Crown during the 1760s, New Hampshire saw one of the earliest overt acts of rebellion with the seizing of Fort William and Mary from the British in 1774. And it was in January 1776 that New Hampshire became the first of the British North American colonies to establish an independent government and state constitution. You go, New Hampshire. Next at number 9 is Maine. 1.4 million people. Maine was actually part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts until 1820, when it voted to secede from Massachusetts and become a separate state. The 8th least populated state in America is Rhode Island with 1.1 million people. It's also the smallest state in the entire country by land area. It's only 48 miles in length and 37 by width. Rhode Island has grown at every census since 1790. It is the second most densely populated state after New Jersey. New Jersey not in this top 10, but that means while it is the 8th least populated state, Rhode Island, because of how small it is the second most densely populated, the most people on top of each other. Number 7, we're going to go from tiny little Rhode Island to huge Montana with 1.1 million people that live here. It is the largest state in the top top 10 in terms of land area, and nationwide, when you look at all states, it is the 4th largest by land area. Most of Montana first came under American sovereignty with the Louisiana Purchase from France in 1803 and was explored by Lewis and Clark shortly thereafter. Rapid population growth and development culminated in statehood in November 1889. Next, at number 6 is Delaware with 1 million people. In December 1787, Delaware was the first state to ratify the Constitution of the United States, earning it the nickname the First State. Since the turn of the 20th century, Delaware has become an onshore corporate haven whose corporate laws are deemed appealing to corporations. Well, I'm so happy for them. Over half of all New York Stock Exchange listed corporations and over 3/5 of the Fortune 500 are actually legally incorporated in Delaware. So Delaware, we love you. You're small. You're one of the least populated states. You were the first state, and now we know why corporations love you. But we're going to go next to South Dakota. We're finally under 1 million people. South Dakota has about 900,000 people that live here. It is the southern part of the former Dakota Territory. It became a state in November 1889, simultaneously with its big brother North Dakota. They are the 39th and 40th states admitted to the Union, and that's because President Benjamin Harrison shuffled the statehood papers before signing them so that no one could tell which became a state first. So they just said, fuck it, we'll put them in alphabetical order, which means North Dakota was 39th, South Dakota 40th. Speaking of North Dakota, they're next, right next on the list. At number 4, 800,000 people live in North Dakota, and I was looking, of all the states in this top 10 list, North Dakota has had the largest increase in population growth from the year 2010 to 2020. The population has grown by nearly 16%, well above any other state in the top 10. I guess people love to freeze their asses off more than they used to. I don't know. Speaking of freezing your ass off, we'll go to Alaska. Number 3, 700,000 people live in Alaska. It is the youngest state on this top 10 list, the 49th state. In 1959, they were admitted to the Union. It's also the largest state by area. Land area of Alaska comprises more total area than the following 3 largest states of Texas, California, and Montana combined, and it is the 7th largest subnational division in the world. Alaska is also the most sparsely populated in the U.S., so people are most spread out there. Number 2 on the list, though, is Vermont. Only 600,000 people live here. The state's capital of Montpelier is the least populated U.S. state capital. Vermont is known for its progressivism, and it was one of the first in the U.S. to recognize same-sex civil unions and marriage, has the highest proportion of renewable electricity generation at 99.9%. Wow. And it is one of the least religious and least racially, ethnically diverse states. Finally, we're at number 1. What do you think is the number 1 least populated state in America? I'll give you a second to think about it. You can do it. Come on. Number 1 is Wyoming. 577,000 people live in Wyoming. The total population makes up less than 0.2% of the total country's population. It is the least populous state despite being the 10th largest by area. Let's go back through that top 10. Number 10 is New Hampshire with 1.4 million people. Number 9 is Maine. 8 is Rhode Island, which is also the smallest by area in the country. Number 7 is Montana. Number 6 is the first state, Delaware. Number 5 is South Dakota. Number 4 is North Dakota. Number 3 is Alaska, which is the largest in the country by land area. Number 2 is Vermont. Number 1, Wyoming. Now, I want to give a quick shout out to our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. It is not a state, but if you were to count Washington, D.C. on this list based on the population living within the city limits, it would be number 3 between Vermont and Alaska. That's 700,000 people, which is a lot of people for a city, but not a lot for a state. To our thousands of listeners in urban centers like New York, Chicago, LA, Houston, Seattle, etc., thanks for listening. But this is a special shout out to our dozens of listeners in Cheyenne, Wyoming, Dover, Delaware, Devil's Lake, North Dakota, and the like. You are living in the least populated states of America, but you're also living in the most populated regions of my heart. I love you even if the Electoral College does not. Thank you. If you're looking for more lists like this, check out the Tiny Tennish number 8, where I covered the top 10 most forgettable states in America. You can find it wherever you're listening to this episode now. There's also a link in the show notes. Thanks again, and until next time, farewell.